Ladies and gentlemen, when we speak of evil, we are not discussing some far-off mythical force, but a set of identifiable behaviors and tendencies that disrupt lives, tear apart communities, and corrode the foundation of trust upon which all meaningful human relationships rest. Evil is not merely an abstract concept. It is something we can recognize and name in the world around us if we are willing to look honestly at the evidence. The evil, when we discuss the concept of evil, it is critical to ground it in observable reality rather than dismiss it as a vague or overly moralistic term. Evil, in practical terms, can be understood as a set of behaviors and attitudes that consistently cause harm, undermine trust, and exploit the vulnerabilities of others. To understand it is to arm ourselves with the tools to recognize it when it manifests in our lives. Evil is not a mysterious or supernatural force. It is disturbingly human. It is rooted in patterns of thought and action that prioritize self-interest, power, or malice over the well-being of others. This means evil can be subtle, often presenting itself in ways that seem ordinary at first glance. It is precisely this subtlety that makes it dangerous. If we dismiss evil as something that only exists in extreme or dramatic forms, we leave ourselves vulnerable to its quieter, more insidious expression. The presence of evil is often marked by a deliberate effort to disrupt or dismantle the foundations of trust and mutual respect that allow relationships and communities to flourish. Trust is a fragile thing, painstakingly built but easily destroyed, and evil thrives in its absence. Whether it is through lies, manipulation, or acts of betrayal, those who engage in evil behavior seek to destabilize this foundation, creating environments of suspicion and fear. They understand, consciously or not, that when trust collapses, people become more isolated, more vulnerable, and easier to control. And so that's where their attention should be. That's where their focus should be. Another essential aspect of understanding evil is recognizing its intentionality. Evil is not the same as ignorance or error. People make mistakes, act selfishly, or harm others unintentionally. These are human flaws, but they are not inherently evil. Evil, on the other hand, operates with a level of awareness. It is calculated and purposeful, aimed at achieving goals that disregard or even thrive on the suffering of others. The essential aspect of evil, this intentionality, sets it apart and makes it particularly destructive. Perhaps the most unsettling characteristic of evil is its adaptability. It does not always come in the form of overt violence or blatant wrongdoing. It can appear in the guise of charm, competence, or even benevolence. This is why recognizing evil requires discernment. It involves looking beyond surface appearances and paying attention to patterns of manipulation, exploitation, and harm. These behaviors, when repeated over time, reveal the true nature of the individual behind them. To understand evil is not to dwell on it unnecessarily or to become cynical about human nature. Rather, it is to equip ourselves with the clarity needed to navigate a world where such behaviors exist. Evil cannot always be eradicated, but it can be identified, resisted, and contained. Awareness is the first step toward this resistance, enabling us to protect not only ourselves, but also the broader communities and systems that rely on trust, cooperation, and goodwill to survive. In this way, understanding evil is an act of both self-preservation and service to the greater good. Exploitation without remorse is one of the most chilling signs of a deeply malevolent individual. At its heart, it involves viewing others not as human beings with intrinsic worth, but as objects to be used for personal gain. This perspective strips away the empathy and moral responsibility that underpin healthy human interactions. Instead of fostering cooperation and mutual respect, exploitation is rooted in manipulation and a calculated disregard for the well-being of others. An individual who exploits without remorse operates with a kind of cold efficiency. They often target vulnerabilities, whether emotional, psychological, financial, or situational, and use these weak points as leverage. For instance, someone might exploit a person's trust or loyalty, manipulating them into doing things that serve their agenda. Others may take advantage of financial desperation or emotional instability, offering hollow promises or presenting themselves as allies, only to extract what they need and abandon their victim. This behavior isn't impulsive or accidental. It is deliberate and strategic, designed to maximize their benefit with little concern for the consequences inflicted on others. And the only reason you exist is to serve everyone else. What makes this behavior particularly dangerous is the absence of remorse. Most people experience guilt or discomfort when their actions hurt others, even unintentionally. This emotional response is a natural safeguard, encouraging us to reflect, apologize, and avoid repeating harmful behavior. However, for the exploiter, this safeguard appears to be entirely absent. They do not regret their actions, nor do they feel the need to justify their behavior beyond their own self-interest. If confronted, they may dismiss the harm they've caused, or worse, blame their victims for allowing themselves to be exploited. This lack of remorse is often accompanied by an unsettling ability to rationalize their actions. They may convince themselves that their victims deserved to be exploited, or that their actions were simply the result of their superior intellect or cunning. They might even frame their exploitation as a form of survival or success, as though their ability to manipulate others is a mark of strength rather than a moral failing. This rationalization can make it challenging to hold them accountable because they genuinely believe they have done nothing wrong. Those who exploit without remorse are often adept at blending into society. They may present themselves as charming, competent, or even altruistic, masking their true intentions behind a facade of respectability. This makes it difficult for others to recognize the exploitation until significant damage has been done. Their victims, in many cases, may feel shame or confusion, unsure of how they allowed themselves to be taken advantage of. This emotional turmoil further isolates the victims, preventing them from seeking help or exposing the exploiter. The damage caused by this behavior is profound. It erodes trust and leaves lasting scars on those who have been exploited. Yet, recognizing these patterns can be a powerful defense. Understanding that exploitation without remorse is a deliberate, calculated behavior allows us to protect ourselves and others. It empowers us to set boundaries, question motives, and refuse to become tools in someone else's agenda. While we cannot always prevent exploitation, awareness is a critical step in mitigating its impact and fostering environments where such behavior cannot thrive. So Irene, rather than the tendency to distort reality, is a defining characteristic of individuals who embody malicious intent. This behavior goes beyond simple dishonesty or occasional misrepresentation. It involves a deliberate and systematic effort to reshape perceptions and control narratives for their own benefit. Such individuals are masters of manipulation, using distortion as a weapon to confuse, destabilize, and ultimately dominate those around them. Reality distortion often begins subtly. A lie here, a half-truth there, carefully woven into a larger narrative that benefits the manipulator. These distortions can seem harmless at first, even trivial, but over time they accumulate into a web of falsehoods that can ensnare others. What makes this tactic particularly insidious is that it often targets the victim's perception of their own experiences and understanding. The manipulator's goal is to make their version of events seem more credible than the truth itself, leaving their victim uncertain and disoriented. Gaslighting is a prime example of this behavior. It involves causing someone to question their memory, judgment, or sanity by consistently denying their reality or presenting false information as fact. For instance, the manipulator might insist that events did not happen the way the victim remembers, or suggest that the victim is overreacting, imagining things, or being irrational. Over time, this persistent distortion can erode the victim's confidence in their ability to perceive the world accurately, making them increasingly reliant on the manipulator for guidance and validation. This behavior is not random. It serves a specific purpose. By distorting reality, the manipulator gains control. They can redirect blame, avoid accountability, and position themselves as the arbiter of truth. This creates an imbalance of power, as the victim becomes more dependent on the manipulator's version of events to make sense of their own experiences. In relationships, workplaces, or social settings, this dynamic can lead to a toxic environment where individuals feel powerless, uncertain, and unable to trust their own instincts. The effects of reality distortion extend far beyond the immediate harm to the individual being targeted. When practiced on a larger scale, it can disrupt entire groups, organizations, or communities. Leaders who distort reality can manipulate public opinion, sow division, and undermine collective decision-making. They thrive in chaos, as confusion and mistrust allow them to consolidate power and push their agendas without significant resistance. Recognizing reality distortion requires vigilance and a commitment to truth. One of the most effective defenses against this behavior is fostering critical thinking and self-awareness. By questioning inconsistencies, seeking corroboration, and trusting one's instincts, individuals can resist the pull of distorted narratives. Additionally, surrounding oneself with a supportive network of people who value honesty and integrity can provide a counterbalance to the manipulator's influence. The deliberate distortion of reality is not just a betrayal of trust. It is an act of aggression against one's sense of self and the shared understanding that binds relationships and communities together. To confront and resist this behavior is to reclaim clarity, autonomy, and the fundamental right to discern truth from falsehood. It is a necessary step in safeguarding not only our own well-being, but also the integrity of the environments in which we live and work. Disregard for boundaries is one of the clearest signs of a person operating with malicious intent. Boundaries, whether they are personal, moral, or societal, serve as safeguards for individual autonomy and mutual respect. They define what is acceptable and unacceptable in relationships and interactions, creating a framework for cooperation and harmony. When someone disregards these boundaries, it reveals a profound lack of respect for others and an inherent desire to impose their will regardless of the consequences. This is why leaders are so critical, because they inspire trust and competence and lead people to voluntarily follow them rather than themselves. This behavior often begins with subtle transgressions. An individual might push a small personal boundary, such as overstepping in a conversation or making an inappropriate comment. Under the guise of humor or ignorance, these initial breaches can seem minor, even excusable, but they often serve as a test to gauge how much resistance they will encounter. If the boundary violation is met with tolerance or silence, the individual becomes emboldened to push further, escalating their behavior over time. The motivations behind this disregard are deeply rooted in a sense of entitlement. Those who ignore boundaries often view others as extensions of themselves, tools, resources, or obstacles to be manipulated or overcome. They lack the empathy to recognize that boundaries are not arbitrary restrictions, but essential expressions of a person's dignity and autonomy. Instead of respecting these limits, they see them as challenges or inconveniences that stand in the way of their desires. This behavior can manifest in various ways. It might involve a refusal to respect emotional boundaries, such as prying into private matters, disregarding a partner's need for space, or using guilt and manipulation to exert control. In more extreme cases, it can lead to physical or psychological abuse, as the boundary violator seeks to dominate and subjugate the other person entirely. The impact of such violations is profound, often leaving the victim feeling powerless, devalued, and unsure of how to assert their rights. Ultimately, the dysfunctional relationship, a disregard for societal or moral boundaries, can have devastating consequences. Individuals who operate without respect for ethical norms or legal frameworks often justify their actions through a warped sense of superiority or rationalization. They may see themselves as above the rules, believing their goals or abilities entitle them to special treatment. This attitude is particularly dangerous when such individuals hold positions of power, as their actions can erode trust in institutions, destabilize communities, and create an environment of fear and uncertainty. The cumulative effect of boundary violations is the erosion of trust and safety. Boundaries exist to protect individuals and maintain balance in human interactions. And when they are consistently ignored, relationships and communities suffer. Victims often feel trapped, unsure of how to reassert their boundaries without facing further aggression or retaliation. Resisting this behavior requires both self-awareness and courage. Recognizing when a boundary is being violated is the first step. Equally important is the ability to assert one's limits firmly and consistently, even in the face of pushback. Surrounding oneself with supportive individuals who respect boundaries can also help create a buffer against those who seek to exploit or undermine them. A disregard for boundaries is more than a personal failing. It is a fundamental threat to the principles of respect, dignity, and cooperation that underpin healthy relationships and communities. Addressing and confronting this behavior is essential for preserving these values and ensuring that individuals can live and interact in environments where their rights and boundaries are upheld. The enjoyment of harm is perhaps the most chilling and deeply unsettling sign of a truly malevolent person. This behavior goes beyond selfishness or a lack of empathy. It involves a deliberate and conscious pleasure derived from the pain, suffering, or misfortune of others. While most people instinctively recoil at the thought of causing harm, those who embody this trait seem to relish it, often going out of their way to create chaos or inflict damage simply for the satisfaction it brings. This enjoyment can manifest in subtle and overt ways. On a small scale, it might involve taking pleasure in seeing someone fail, belittling others, or humiliating them in public. Such individuals often mask their malicious intent under the guise of humor, claiming that their actions are just a joke or that their victims are overly sensitive. However, their real goal is to assert dominance, undermine self-confidence, and create an imbalance of power. These small acts, while seemingly inconsequential, can accumulate into a pattern of harm that leaves lasting psychological scars. Enjoyment of harm can escalate to more overt acts of cruelty such as sabotage, bullying, or manipulation designed to cause significant emotional or physical damage. What distinguishes these actions is the intent behind them. Most people who harm others unintentionally feel guilt or regret when they realize the consequences of their actions. In contrast, those who enjoy harm are not only indifferent to the suffering they cause, but actively seek it out. The pain of others is for them a source of gratification, reinforcing their sense of power and control. One of the most disturbing aspects of this behavior is the lack of remorse or accountability. If confronted, such individuals may deflect blame, minimize the impact of their actions, or even attempt to shift the narrative to make themselves appear as the victim. They are adept at rationalizing their behavior, often framing it as justified or necessary. This refusal to acknowledge the harm they cause allows them to continue their destructive patterns without any sense of moral responsibility. The effects of this behavior on victims are profound. Knowing that someone derives pleasure from their suffering can leave individuals feeling dehumanized, powerless, and isolated. It erodes trust, not only in the person causing harm, but in others as well, as victims may struggle to feel safe or valued in their relationships. Over time, this can lead to long-term emotional damage, including anxiety, depression, and a diminished sense of self-worth. The enjoyment of harm poses a serious threat to the cohesion and integrity of communities. When individuals who embody this behavior gain influence or power, their actions can create a culture of fear, distrust, and division. They thrive in environments where cruelty is normalized or overlooked, using chaos and conflict as tools to maintain their position. Recognizing this trait is essential for protecting oneself and others. The key is to look beyond surface-level interactions and observe patterns of behavior. Those who consistently find joy in the suffering of others reveal their character through their actions, no matter how much they attempt to disguise it. Responding to this behavior requires setting firm boundaries, refusing to tolerate or enable cruelty, and seeking support from those who share a commitment to compassion and respect. The enjoyment of harm represents a profound rejection of the values that sustain healthy human relationships: empathy, kindness, and mutual respect. Confronting and resisting this behavior is not just a matter of self-defense. It is an affirmation of these values and a refusal to allow malice to define our interactions with one another. And the furthest thing ironically strikes, recognizing the presence of malice and evil in individuals is not just an intellectual exercise, but an essential skill for navigating the complexities of human relationships and society. Awareness of these destructive traits allows us to protect ourselves and others from harm, but this recognition is not always straightforward. Evil is rarely blatant or self-evident. It often conceals itself behind masks of charm, competence, or even altruism, making discernment a critical tool in identifying and confronting it. The first step in recognizing malice is to understand that it manifests through patterns rather than isolated incidents. Everyone is capable of selfishness or insensitivity on occasion, but these behaviors alone do not define a person as evil. What distinguishes truly malicious individuals is the consistency and deliberateness of their harmful actions. They operate with an intentionality that prioritizes their own gain, control, or pleasure over the well-being of others. This is not about momentary lapses in judgment, but about a recurring pattern of choices that reflect a fundamental disregard for others. Malice often hides behind a carefully constructed facade. People who act with evil intent are frequently skilled at presenting themselves in ways that disarm suspicion. They may appear confident, charismatic, or even kind, using these qualities to gain trust and influence. This ability to blend in and appear harmless makes them particularly dangerous, as they can operate undetected for extended periods. And their true nature is revealed not in how they present themselves, but in the consequences of their actions. They leave a trail of broken trust, damaged relationships, and emotional or physical harm. Another key aspect of recognizing malice is paying attention to how individuals respond to accountability. When confronted with the consequences of their actions, most people will show some degree of remorse or a willingness to make amends. In contrast, malicious individuals often double down on their behavior, deflect blame, or attempt to manipulate the narrative to make themselves appear as the victim. They may use tactics such as gaslighting, guilt-tripping, or shifting the focus onto others to avoid responsibility. Their unwillingness to acknowledge wrongdoing or change their behavior is a significant red flag. Malice also thrives in environments where it goes unchallenged. These individuals exploit situations where boundaries are weak, where people are hesitant to speak out, or where accountability is absent. They manipulate social dynamics to their advantage, fostering division, confusion, or fear to maintain control. Recognizing this behavior involves not only observing the individual, but also understanding the context in which they operate. They flatter you, they pollute you, they spy on you. Protecting oneself from malicious individuals requires both awareness and action. Setting clear boundaries is essential, as is refusing to tolerate or excuse harmful behavior. Building a network of supportive relationships can provide strength and perspective, helping to counteract the isolating effects of dealing with malice. Additionally, fostering a commitment to truth and integrity, both personally and within larger communities, creates an environment where malicious behavior is less likely to thrive. Recognizing malice is about seeing clearly and refusing to look away, even when the truth is uncomfortable. It is an act of self-preservation and a defense of the values that make human connection possible: trust, empathy, and mutual respect. By identifying and resisting malice, we uphold these values and create spaces where individuals and communities can flourish, free from the corrosive influence of those who seek to harm. In conclusion, recognizing the signs of malicious and destructive behavior is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is a vital tool for protecting ourselves, our relationships, and our communities. Evil does not always announce itself loudly. It often hides behind charm, rationalizations, or subtle manipulations, making discernment crucial. By understanding the consistent patterns of exploitation, manipulation, reality distortion, boundary violations, and the chilling enjoyment of harm, we can begin to see through the masks that such individuals wear. Awareness is our first line of defense. When we learn to identify these traits, we empower ourselves to set boundaries, hold others accountable, and resist the corrosive influence of those who act with malice. While confronting such behaviors is never easy, it is necessary not only for our personal well-being, but also for the integrity of the communities and relationships we value. This awareness reinforces our commitment to uphold the principles that counteract evil: empathy, respect, accountability, and truth. By standing firm in these values, we create environments where trust and cooperation can flourish, ensuring that those who seek to harm cannot thrive unchecked. To confront and resist malice is not just an act of self-preservation, but a statement of who we are and the kind of world we aim to build. A world where the dignity and worth of every individual are recognized and protected.